All right, let's just get straight into it, shall we? Welcome to today's Masterclass Explainer. I'm Professor Steve Keen, and today we're going to absolutely shatter this persistent, stubborn myth of economic equilibrium. We're going to figure out how capitalism actually works. For way too long, the mainstream economic establishment has been peddling models that are, quite frankly, completely disconnected from reality. So today, we are tossing those out and looking under the hood at the real engine of our economy. Here's a quick look at our syllabus for today. We'll start with the post-Keynesian paradigm, dive into fiat and credit money, explore capitalism's two price levels, break down private debt and instability, and finally, we'll wrap up by modeling chaotic dynamics. Okay, part one, the post-Keynesian paradigm. It is time to escape the neoclassical fantasy. To actually break free from that fantasy, we've got to face the core issue. Standard, mainstream models treat the economy like some giant barter system, where money is just this convenient little veil thrown over transactions. To get back to reality, we have to define endogenous money. This is the absolute bedrock of the post-Keynesian approach. It's the concept that separates us from pretty much all other schools of thought. Endogenous money means the money supply isn't just dropped out of a helicopter, and it isn't strictly fixed by a central bank. Instead, it's largely driven by the essential control that borrowers have over credit. Think about it. When a bank issues a loan, it literally creates new money out of thin air. Just look at the stark contrast between these two paradigms. The neoclassical view actually fantasizes that money is neutral, meaning they think changing the money supply only affects prices, not real economic output. It's a nice story, but it's totally wrong. The post-Keynesian reality recognizes that money is strictly non-neutral. Endogenous money and the constant interplay of credit fundamentally drive the boom and bust cycles of capitalism. That's exactly what causes our cyclical crises and leaves us stuck in periods of unemployment. Moving right along to part two, fiat and credit money, we are building the economy from the ground up. Let's pull back from the abstract for a second and look at how fiat money is actually created in the real world. In this stylized historical flow, you see coins initially created by the mint, then they're transferred to the treasury, and finally spent out into the public. This brilliantly illustrates a symbiotic, not parasitic, but symbiotic relationship between public sector spending and private sector trade. When the government takes resources and pays with its tokens, it's actually providing the exact medium that allows private trade to dramatically expand. Now, if we fast forward and bridge this historical concept to the modern banking sector, we uncover something absolutely fascinating. When you map out the exact accounting flows between the Treasury, the central bank, and private banks, a vital truth emerges. The interest paid on Treasury bonds actually creates positive equity for private banks. This is exactly why government debt functions so differently from household debt, and why maintaining a positive rate of interest on Treasury bonds is structurally significant for the banking system. Which brings us to part three.
capitalism's two price levels. We're looking at commodities versus financial assets.
Building on our new understanding of money, we arrive at this crucial post-Keynesian proposition. Modern capitalism is basically running on two entirely different price levels. On one hand, you have everyday commodity prices, the goods and services we actually consume. Those are tethered pretty closely to their physical cost of production. But on the other hand, you have financial asset prices, and they play by a completely different set of rules. They are wildly speculative, based entirely on expected future cash flows. When you ground one price level in physical reality and let the other one run wild on expectations, well, you create the perfect breeding ground for severe financial instability. John Maynard Keynes brilliantly hit on this way back in 1937. He pointed out that when investment decisions ramp up, they demand extra finance. Capitalists don't just sit around twiddling their thumbs waiting for prior savings to accumulate, they go straight to the banks. The banks then create this extra finance, injecting brand new endogenous money right into the economy, which dramatically alters aggregate demand.
All right, on to part 4, private debt and instability. Let's dig into the causal loop of crises.
This takes us right to the absolute heart of Hyman Minsky's financial instability hypothesis. Notice the staggering surge in private debt to GDP ratios across the advanced economies. I mean, historically, private debt just skyrockets during these massive speculative binges. But take a look at the more recent dynamics, especially during events like the COVID pandemic. Corporate sectors have taken on massive new debt, not to grow, but simply to roll over existing obligations and survive severe cash flow crises. This isn't fueling a boom. No, it's a desperate measure that leaves our whole economy heavily burdened and incredibly fragile. So how do we wrap our heads around this systematically? Enter the Goodwin model. And I want to be super clear here. This isn't some made-up ad hoc assumption. It's a precise causal loop derived directly from incontrovertible macroeconomic definitions. Let's trace it out together. First, labor divided by population gives us the employment rate. That employment rate feeds right into the Phillips curve to dictate the rate of wage changes. Those changes then integrate into the actual wage rate. Finally, that wage rate determines capitalist profits, which mathematically drives investment and, consequently, private debt. It is a closed, perfectly logical loop of causality. And this causal loop perfectly exposes the fatal flaw in the system. During a boom period, capitalists get overly optimistic. It's human nature, and they invariably start investing more than their actual profits. How do they do that? By borrowing. This means the acceleration of private debt is mathematically tied directly to gross investment minus profits. They finance all this overexuberance with credit money, driving up the private debt ratio until the sheer weight of that debt burden eventually suffocates the very growth that created it in the first place. Finally, part 5, modeling chaotic dynamics. We are going to emulate the butterfly effect using Minsky. If we want to truly understand these nonlinear forces, static spreadsheets just aren't going to cut it. We need dynamic systems modeling, like the Minsky software interface we use. See these Lorenz attractors mapping out the butterfly effect across different axes? They visually prove a vital, unignorable point. You absolutely cannot reduce a complex, living economic system to the static, dead properties of a fantasy equilibrium. The economy is a chaotic system, orbiting multiple points, and our tools must reflect that beautiful, chaotic reality. So, instead of obsessing over some mythical equilibrium, we have to realize that the system's behavior relies completely on initial conditions and key parameters. What's actually driving the car here? Well, it's variables like the prevailing interest rate, the slope of the investment function, which basically means how aggressively capitalists react to profit signals, and the precise tipping point where investment finally equals profits, causing firms to abruptly stop their borrowing binge. Take a really close look at the phase plot in this Keene-Minsky model. By charting the employment rate against the wage share of output, you can literally watch the system flip from a stable cycle to a completely unstable, wildly expanding spiral. It perfectly exposes the fake dynamics peddled by standard mainstream economics. Those general equilibrium models try to force a living, breathing system into a single static dot on a page, completely ignoring the mathematical inevitability of systemic collapse when debt gets out of control. And that brings us to our conclusion. A call for a new economics. By now, it should be blindingly obvious, right? Understanding modern capitalism requires a dynamic, non-equilibrium, monetary, and, frankly, energy-aware approach. The stale, barter-based models of the past simply cannot protect us from the financial crises of the present. The tools to map reality are right here in front of you. So here is my final question for you. Are you ready to finally abandon the illusion of equilibrium and embrace the chaos? Thank you for watching this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the models.